Are you stuck in the same old routine at work? Do you find yourself hitting a creative wall, unable to see beyond your current perspective? It's time to break free and unlock the power of fresh perspectives. Hello, this is David Guthrow back with Discover Fresh Perspectives. Today, we have an opportunity to discover some fresh perspectives with Joyce Perrin. Welcome, Joyce.
Thank you very much. I'm so pleased to be on your show. I'm looking for some great conversation.
As am I, and as I'm sure as our listeners are as well. So Joyce, I would just like to start with, what are you passionate about? What's one thing that you're passionate about? We can discover that a little bit.
Well, my passion is travel. I have traveled to 187 countries and 30 territories around the world. And I started my major part of my travel after I was 57 years old. And I was
Now, just a second here. You started at 57 and you've been to how many countries?
87.
8. My gosh. And holy cow. So how long did it take you to do all those countries starting at age 57?
I went 23 years.
That's amazing. Okay, sorry. So carry on.
As I resigned my job, my children had all married and had graduated from university, so we're all secure. And I was divorced at the time and decided that I always wanted to live and work in a foreign country. And that happened because I was a Girl Guide in my younger years. Were you a Boy Scout?
I was indeed a Cub Scout and a Boy Scout.
Right. Well, you know the Powell family, and Lady Baden-Powell is the lady who founded the Girl Guides, her husband, the Boy Scouts. And this was a wonderful opportunity for me to go to an international camp in Sweden representing Canada. There were 10 of us. And it just so happened at that time that Lady Baden-Powell was also at the camp. So we met her once in London as we were going from London and then over to Sweden. And then we met her in Sweden. And it happened that I was selected to go and represent Canada at the opening ceremonies.
Mm-hmm. And
of course, I met Lady Baden-Powell then. And then it also just happened, I was going to the headquarters for lunch, and everybody got a chance to go to the headquarters at lunch. But my day, Lady Baden-Powell was there, and where I seated next to Lady Baden-Powell. Then the same thing happened when she came to our camp. Where did they seat her? Next to me. And so it was a wonderful experience to chat with her that many times in a very relaxed, open setting and find out just about her. And I was curious. How did she do it? How long did it take? How did she get the stamina to go and do this all over the world? And we had some great conversation. Well, then she mentioned she was going to be, she asked me where I was from, and I said, oh, I was from Edmonton. And I was going into nursing at that time. I had finished high school. She said, well, I'm going to be there in a couple of years. So we met, of course, and she signed all my photos.
Did you determine who was stalking whom at that point?
Well, I think I was stalking her, but it just happened. I mean, it was just, I was in the right place at the right time. Mm-hmm. And because I had met her so many times, people just put me with her again so that she would be comfortable with somebody, I guess. That's what they told me. Because I said to them, well, shouldn't somebody else be there because I met her? They'd say, no, we want you there. So that was just the way it was. But I had a lovely letter from her. Oh, she was so gracious. And that time in Girl Guides, when I became a patrol leader and got my gold cord, that really was the basis for my management foundation when I eventually became a CEO of a hospital and worked for the World Health Organization
Wow.
and the International Development Fund. So I go back to Girl Guides as a very strong influence on my life, and also the fact that Lady Baden-Powell had a motto that it's not how much you have, but it's what you give
Hmm.
makes your life rich. I missed the quote. It's not quite that way, but that's the essence of it. And so I am very grateful to the Girl Guides. And I'm sorry now, as I've talked to some of the leaders, there isn't the same interest in the Girl Guide movement.
Yeah, it's I we had some good friends that their daughter and niece are both still very, very involved. And actually, they just came back they went on a trip over to Japan to meet with some guides over there. Like they're just in their teens, and it's for those that are involved, it's absolutely wonderful. What a great grounding for, being a contributor and being part of a community of learners and people that care about each other. And we're way too short of those opportunities these days. So that got you off on a great start.
And when I was there at the camp, I decided that at some point in my life, I wanted to live and work in a foreign country. And so I went into nursing because you had to be a nurse to be a stewardess at one
Oh,
time.
oh, okay. Interesting.
And I wanted to travel the world, but I was too slow. That time they had very strict limitations, and you had to be taller to be able to put the things in the overhead bins and so on. I was too short.
Oh,
Well, there wasn't anything I could do about that. So I never did work with an airline company. I wish I had. I would have saved an awful lot of money.
so there's just a whole variety of questions running through my mind, and so maybe I'll just start with a couple of them. And one of them, a lot of people think it'd be great to travel, but they don't have the courage or whatever it takes to do so. So, what did it take for you to make that decision to first start traveling and then keep going? What fueled that?
Well, I really was curious. It all went back to a book, a series of books that we got at home. They were called Lands and People,
Oh,
and they were a blue bound book. And you may have had those in your household at that time. But on that in that book, it showed pictures of people all over the world and what they were eating. And I was just
hmm.
really curious. I've been always very curious. But at that time, and then, so that was my basis. And I love geography and I love that sort of thing. And so then when I got the opportunity to meet people at the Girl Guide camp, this just, was instilled in my mind. But I had to pack up my suitcase and put it in the closet for a good many years. And I never knew whether it was going to really work. But I did. And I just traveled and consulted and just had a wonderful time. It was so rewarding to be able to work with people in the World Health Organization,
Hmm.
really help them with some of the foundation for a quality improvement program. That was my area of expertise. And when I worked in Saudi Arabia, well, then I got to know a lot about that culture in that part of the world. And so it was very helpful when I did consulting all through the Mediterranean region for the World Health Organization.
So, when you talked about the number of countries that you'd visited, some of them, I mean, I've in some of my work, I've been to some pretty remote places when I was doing some work for a mining company, doing some facilitation for them. But some of those places were places I would never take my family for a whole variety of reasons. And when you listed the number of countries, I'm sure not all of them were really comfortable places for someone from Edmonton to come and visit. So, maybe could you talk about some of your experiences going to some of the countries that are not typically tourist destinations and certainly not ones where English speakers would go and what that was like for you?
Well, let me tell you, one of the times we traveled as a family, my ex-husband was a consultant and he was working in Papua New Guinea,
Mhm.
and which is a very remote country. And at the time, we had three children, four, five, and six, and or 6 and 7. I guess it's 4, 6, and 7. And so we took them all around the Pacific Rim for 2.5 months in the summer. It just happened it was going in the summer, and we said, well, why not? But it wasn't until a couple of months ago that I realized that while we were in Papua New Guinea, he had to go off and do other consulting. So my mother and I and the three children traveled Papua New Guinea by ourselves. And often we stayed in the local tourist huts.
Mhm.
And we got to know the people there, the women there, and they were always so helpful. And so they told me how to cook the food, how to go to the market, I had a month of learning all those things. And I did not realize, I did not put two and two together until recently, that because of that, I was very comfortable going to many different places in Africa
Mhm.
that probably I would not have been had I not had that experience before. And so I have no qualms about traveling myself. And I had 3 years in Saudi Arabia to also get acclimatized to that part of the world and their interests. And of course, Saudi Arabia had many people from different cultures. So I made a point of meeting different people because I knew after I finished there, I wanted to travel the world.
Mm.
So it was just by chance, those things all fell in together. And when I was traveling solo, I was really very comfortable.
Mm.
Only one incident that was a little dicey, but it all turned out okay out of all those years.
Well, that's that's a pretty good safety record, quite frankly. And so, I mean, what I'm getting is that part of what you're able to do is because you establish relationships with people, you establish connections. Like it felt like you're more than just a tourist observing what was going on, that you actually embedded yourself in some of those communities and actually made friends. Is that a fair observation?
That was my mission, was to stay with families whenever I could. And I can tell you a funny story about living with them in Zimbabwe. And I was there. The deal was I was to do the women's work. There to do the women's work. Well, I thought this would be an interesting experience, and it certainly was. We washed the clothes in the river, where we had to go down this steep hill with lots of mud. And I had this wonderful shirt of the man of the house, a very nice white shirt, and I was the one that was washing it. Well, it slipped from my fingers, and I got caught the arm just grabbed it before it went down, and there was some rapids in, and I said to the girl, "Oh, what's beyond those little rapids?" And she said, "Well, they're the falls." And she knew exactly what I was asking, because I think she was probably horrified that she saw this shirt going over the falls. But it was safe. I got it, and I didn't let go of anything else again. I mean, you have one, and you have to rub it with a bar of soap. And then with the jeans, we had to rub it with soap and then pound it on the rocks. I mean, that was the only way we could get them really clean. And then you go up. There are very few clotheslines, only for very special clothes, like
Huh.
maybe 3 feet of clothesline. And the rest we just put on the bushes to dry.
This
That's
is
the way it happened.
it's,
Every
it's it's much the way we do it in West Vancouver, Joyce.
day.
No, actually, if you tried that where I live, you'd probably be violating a bylaw of some sort, unfortunately.
That's right, exactly. But so my mission as I traveled was to visit and stay with families wherever I could. And I stayed with people in Venezuela. I stayed with people in Korea. I stayed with people all over. And that's part I loved. I really loved that.
So, how big is your meeting all those people? I guess I'm curious about how many of them you stay in touch with, but that would be like a huge Christmas card list or a birthday card list to stay in touch with those folks. Do you have an opportunity to stay connected with some of them?
Well, I do still connect with some, but when I started, there was no internet and there was no cell phones, and we had to make phone calls or faxes. That was it. And so, unfortunately, if I had done it now, it would be all on the internet. You'd have all the information, but I didn't have everything was written on paper. And when I went through my list to try to contact them, people had moved and so on. But I do keep in touch with still some people, and find that but most of them have died because I'm 88. And so
You're 88?
I'm 88. And so most of the people I knew have died now, unfortunately.
Well, and from what I can see, you're still going strong. And I'll put some of this information in the program notes, but I see here you've written a book. I love the title, Ants in My Pants: One Woman's Unexpected Adventures Across 7 Continents. Like that.
Right. Just like that.
That's amazing.
Or me looking for gorillas in Uganda.
Well, I'll make sure we post that picture in the program notes as well. Looking for gorillas.
Would you like me to send you some information?
Uh, Anything you send me, I'll make sure we put it in the program notes. Absolutely, Joyce. That'd be fabulous.
I'll be glad to do that.
So, so since we don't have the book in front of us at the moment, at least I don't, what are some other so you talked about the shirt that almost got away. That's kind of be an interesting title for a book as well. What are some other experiences that, when you think back over those years in those 187 countries, that are there a few that just kind of pop up that you kind of go, can't believe that was amazing?
Well, let me tell you about climbing Mount Kilimanjaro.
Okay.
I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, and Mount Kilimanjaro is the highest mountain in Africa. It is one of the 7 summits, and that means it's one of the highest mountains on the 7 continents in the world. And it is a standalone mountain. It's very windy. It has you start at night, and oh, it was wonderful. We started at night, and at first there were no clouds and the moon was out. I always booked on a full moon when I was doing something like that because it gives you more light. It was like There were diamonds on black velvet in the sky. And there were so many diamonds. It was just so amazing. The stars were so bright. Of course, there's no ambient light.
Mm.
And so we started at midnight and we got to the first rim at sunrise. And we sat down and watched the sun splash the golden and blue rays across the valley below. And it was exciting. But I got very excited and decided to run. Well, that was not a smart thing to do because I used up my reserve oxygen. When you are in an altitude at almost 5,895 meters, you don't have much oxygen. You can't replace it, and your muscles cramp. I was in agony and could hardly keep going. And my guide whispered to me, "Holy, holy, holy," which meant slowly,
Oh.
slowly, slowly in Swahili. And I went slowly, 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 and the wind would come up, and it's very open just along that ridge to get to the very top. And it took a while, but I made it. I got there, I hugged the sun, tears falling down my eyes, going down my face, and I had really a wonderful feeling of accomplishment. And so it's like if it's like climbing a mountain. Everybody has a mountain to climb. It could be maybe you've had a loss, maybe you've had a failure, maybe you've had some sort of an incident that has really, you've suffered. And so it was just like climbing that mountain was one way to show that you can do it. And there's a quote from Churchill that failure is not final. What's the other one? Failure's not final. Oh, there's two other things, but it says, "Oh, and if you keep going, you'll get your goal." And that's exactly what I had that in my head all the time. I was going poley, 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 just one step at a time.
Wow.
That was an exciting time. And it was a wonderful accomplishment to get to the top and to see that mountain sign. And afterwards, it was really nice to be able to wear that shirt. I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro.
Well, and it's such a wonderful metaphor. You said it's, we all have mountains to climb. And also you described it so beautifully, like with the stars and things like that. And also, you know, sometimes timing is so important, and choosing to do something like that with a full moon so you can see more. I think that's a strong metaphor as well. How do we ensure in any of our adventures we set ourselves up to see and experience as much as possible? I think it's a wonderful metaphor.
That's right. And I was 64 when I did that.
Of course, right? Why do it any sooner?
But it was a challenge. My friend did the challenge. But let me tell you about, this is another story. So I am a swimmer. I was a synchronized swimmer. And so I love swimming and I love scuba diving. And so when I was in Saudi Arabia, I decided to take the advanced scuba diving course at Patty so I could do wreck dives, and also so that I was more prepared in case I was diving in Africa and things are not quite the same, I'd be better prepared. So we were out, there were 8 of us, and we were out in the Red Sea. We had just finished seeing this wonderful, wonderful ship that was on the bottom. And the people had already put the saucers and plates in as if they were just waiting for people to come around there. And it was so interesting because I felt, oh my gosh, I could just go there and sit and have my dinner. And so we were on our way back, excuse me, and people some had less than a third of the air in the tank because we were on our way back, no problem. And all of a sudden we heard on our tanks. And when you hear that, your heart races, you look around, you know there is really bad danger. You've
Sorry,
got
sorry, Joyce. I couldn't hear what the noise was on the tank for our listeners.
just a little knock on the tank, but
Okay, okay.
it's just like that. And so it was quite frightening. And all of a sudden, we turned around and there was a tiger shark.
Oh,
Now, tiger shark is second to the great white for eating humans.
oh,
And it is it is a scavenger of the sea. But the most dangerous thing about a tiger shark, it is unpredictable. You have no idea what it's going to do. So we gathered up, got our arms hauled back, made a big ball, and this shark circled and circled and circled, and my eyes would get bigger and bigger every time he'd come. And once he opened its mouth, and it was so big, it could take all of us in one big swell soup. But he got tired of that, and I guess we looked too big. But he could have managed us no problem. So we headed back to the boat. We all got back on the boat, thank goodness, but we had to buddy breathe. Now, what that means is I take a breath of my air. I had more air, so I would share mine with the other swimmer. And so I'd take a breath, they would take a breath. I would take a breath, they would take a breath. We all got back to the boat. And then just as we were about to leave, somebody said, oh, look over there. There's the dorsal fin coming right along. And he, I guess, had followed us, but we all got on board, thank goodness. And he disappeared when we started the motor.
now, are you sure it was a tiger shark and not a tired shark?
No, I am perfectly correct. It was a tiger shark. When he opened his mouth, it was a tiger shark.
Wow, that's incredible.
Tiger sharks, they're the scavengers of the sea. And they found tires, they found they found all sorts of tools, they found all sorts of things in the stomach of this tiger shark. So you see, I mean, if they could take a tire, they could take 2 or 3 people.
Well, I'm guessing if they're scavengers of the sea, the one tactic you don't want to do is play dead because
Oh,
we'll take that one.
but that was an exciting time,
It sounds it.
a great time. And we were very happy to be back on the ship.
So, Joyce, if you're thinking back about all these different countries you went to, and there's one or two that you want to go back to because you felt there was just more to explore or to experience, what are one or two countries that, given the opportunity, you'd like to do that?
Well, my favorite country is Antarctica.
Oh,
I went there twice. And I went there because the second time I wanted to go around the back part of Antarctica and see Scott's hut, because Scott was the person, and Edmondson, who had tried to get to the South Pole. And a very interesting story about Edmondson. Edmondson was a Norwegian, and he had wanted to find the Northwest Passage. So my great-grandfather was the lands and titles officer of Alberta and the Northwest Territory. And my mother was traveling with me when she was 95, and we went to Spitsbergen. And she said, oh, I know him. He came to my house for dinner.
wow.
And at first I thought, that's interesting. why would that be? So then she said, well, he had to get permission to live with the Eskimos in the North Pole and in the Arctic. And so there was a fellow on the ship who was an expert in Edmondson. And he said, yes, that's exactly right. So we worked at when he was there and how old my mom was. And yes, and that was true that he had to come to speak to my grandfather to get permission, that it turned out to be very likely true. Of course, we have no proof, but there's no reason that she would say, oh, he was there. And she had enough stories. And of course, when you're 95, your early years come back to you very vivid. So we figured that it was right. So that was a very interesting story. And it made it even more so because having been to the South Pole. Now, I didn't get to the South Pole exactly, but I was pretty close. So that was fun, you know. So I've had a lot of things. I like the Antarctica. Unfortunately now, there were some seals when I was there. They were mummified seals that were mummified by the katabatic winds that were coming between two mountain ranges and sucked up the moisture. That was the driest place in the world.
Wow.
These mummified seals were time dated to 2,000 years. And they had been there that long and preserved just as if they were sleeping because of these katabatic winds. Now, however, I looked on the internet recently and there was a picture of a seal that looks very close to the picture I had taken. This one was already rotted and its bones were showing. And so nobody will be able to see those mummified seals anymore.
Well, and as pieces of the ice shelf start breaking off into the ocean, it's going to be less of Antarctica to go around, which is really an unfortunate consequence of climate change.
And the increase in the size of the height of the ocean.
Right.
So we were lucky because we had 2 helicopters on board our ship. And we were able to land on the first iceberg or the ice floe that had broken away from the shelf. And it was the size of the state of Maryland.
Wow.
Landed on top of that and had some billion-year-old ice with our champagne, which was really very special. It was a wonderful experience. And I really do love Antarctica. I don't think I would want to go back because things will be so changed.
Right.
Often.
So, you know, you're not just sitting around doing nothing. Let's come into the present now. What keeps you busy, Joyce? Because I don't see you just kind of sitting around twiddling your thumbs these days.
Well, I do several things. I do some volunteer work. I was very active with the Ontario health team in Oshawa, in the Oshawa Hospital complex. And I still am working with the Ministry of Health or the other group. Oh my goodness, the name just escapes me. But the other group that is working there. And I work as a patient family advisor, just as with my experience in healthcare and international healthcare and caring people. And when I was also in Panama, I was in Panama for a number of years, and I co-founded the Panama Hospice and Respite Foundation. And so we really help people manage their last stages of life there because both expats and Panamanians, you know, it's always a challenge no matter where you are. And a lot of the expats they would come when they're in their 60s And then all of a sudden something would happen and they couldn't fly home because they would have had to take him in a plane with a doctor and a nurse, and that's very expensive and they couldn't afford it. So
Mhm.
we helped them work through the Panamanian system. And that was very rewarding.
So, you like, you're the closest human that I've come into contact with. It reminds me of the Ever Ready Bunny, like just go, 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 go. I'd like to ask one final question before we close, Joyce, and that's, for people that are, wondering if they have the spirit or the wherewithal to travel. What's some advice that you would give to them? Like, why bother? What's in it for them to take off in some kind of adventure? Perhaps not the extreme that you did, but just something that's out of their comfort zone. What advice would you give to them?
I if it if I was traveling now, I would be very careful as to what countries I would be going to. When I traveled was a time when it was very peaceful. I spent
Mhm.
months traveling Russia with no problem. I would not go there today.
Mhm.
And I think that the one thing that people have to be concerned with is where are they and how can they keep abreast of the news?
Right.
And it isn't just, oh, I'm going there and registering with the Canadian embassy. It's really keeping an eye on what's happening. Because if you look at what's happened in the last 2 years, things come up very, very quickly and you can be caught in those situations. But on the other hand, you may not be caught. And and you can't plan for every possibility. And so I think just use your common sense and do that. But make sure you are prepared when I traveled, I wore a dog tag, which had my name, I was a Canadian citizen. It had my doctor's phone number. And she happened to be my daughter. So that was a nice connection. But it had that information. I wore that around my neck all the time. And I also put one on my shoe because for some reason, shoes survive a lot of disasters. And if there's an identification on a shoe, it's possible in case something happens to you. And with the healthcare in different parts of Africa, that is the most dangerous time. And I think that it's just very careful, be very careful, plan if I was doing it again, I would get a world map and I would make a plan about where you're going to go. Don't do what a friend was almost going to do when somebody said, oh, we're going to take this cruise and we'll come with us. We need one more person for the cabin or something like that. And the person said, oh, that would be great. And then we sat down to talk about it. But that destination really was not on her bucket list. And so people can get caught up in doing something because somebody else wants to do it instead of sitting down making a plan. So if you're going to visit Switzerland, well, then maybe you want to visit the countries around it. Maybe you want to go to Italy. Maybe you want to ski both. You go in the winter and ski Switzerland and Italy. There are things like that you can do. You don't have to just take a cruise because a cruise is great, but you really do not see the countries. I didn't count my countries at all. I
So,
mean, doesn't you don't know the country, you just go and put your foot there.
so some of the things that I've captured from this, as well as some our conversation a little bit earlier, be planful, be intentional about where you go, be safe. So be aware of what's going on. Make sure that you have contact information, either around your neck or on your shoes, to get to know the people we talked about earlier, and also the importance of being curious. I think all of those, that's such good advice. And so, I would like to thank you so much, Joyce. I suspect that we could probably have a conversation about another couple of hours to explore, but for those that are listening, we'll make sure that people know where they can find your book. And thank you so much for being with me here today, Joyce. I've really appreciated it.
Thank you so much. I've enjoyed it too, and it's wonderful to share my story. Thank you for the opportunity.
My pleasure. So, David Guthrow, Discover Fresh Perspectives. New perspective with a new guest every week. Hope you will come back and join us next week. Thank you so much. Subscribe now, because on Fresh Perspectives, every episode is an opportunity to explore new horizons and redefine what's achievable.